If I cough and bark in the middle of this discussion, please, I'm sorry, I can't do too much about it. Anyway, thank you, Katrina. I'm honored to be here, and I too want to wish IFPRI happy anniversary on its 40th year. IFPRI's cutting-edge research has helped the United States figure out the most effective ways to attack global hunger. We look forward to continuing our strong partnership over the next 40 years, and I have some suggestions which I'll get to soon for new areas of research. But first, the theme of our celebration, looking backward, looking forward. The U.S. government is proud of the successes we've achieved under Feed the Future, but we have a lot more to do, and we know we need to do it in partnership with IFPRI, with developing countries, civil society, and all the major players, including the private sector. Food security and climate change are top priorities for President Obama and for Secretary Kerry. That's why I'm here. My mandate from them is to build on the successes we have had to date and to look forward to emerging challenges that could catch us off guard in the future so that we can begin to address them today. I want to start with revisiting food security conventional wisdom. Some popular notions threaten to hold us back and keep us from making even greater progress. For example, most discussions about global food security include the FAO statistic about increasing global ag productivity by 60% to feed the world's growing population. Think about it. If we did that, would we be more food secure? Would food get to the people who need it most? Would it give them proper nutrition? An equally ubiquitous statistic is that 3/4 of the world's hungry people live in rural areas. Do we know it's true? How old is the data that underlies that number? Does every country define rural and urban the same way? Do greater incomes in cities lead to greater food security when the price of food is so much higher in cities? Too often we repeat these numbers without questioning them. We continue to let them influence our global agendas and our work. What we need to do is to think more broadly about food security and nutrition, to consider new challenges and new approaches. Now, we all know that one of the greatest threats to global food security is climate change. We know that the effects of climate change mean that producers have to adapt. We know that agriculture contributes to climate change. Globally, it emits as much greenhouse gases as all of our cars, ships, trains, and planes combined. This isn't new. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I am asking you to do one thing. Recognize the urgency of making agriculture climate smart, increasing productivity, protecting the environment, and conserving natural resources at the same time. That's what the United States government is doing. We are making a full frontal effort to prioritize climate-smart agriculture throughout our agencies and in many ways, through Feed the Future, through initiatives that my office has started, and through our leadership in the Global Alliance for Climate-Smart Agriculture. Now, obviously, for families who make their living on agriculture, our priority is to sustainably increase their productivity to improve their incomes and their food security. We don't want them to starve. We don't want them to stay in a subsistence level. But where agriculture is making significant contributions to climate change, and we can make changes in the way we adapt and the way we produce food to help the climate, we need to do it. And we have no choice but to accelerate our efforts to address this nexus of climate and food security. Now, in many places, we know families who have made a living farming, fishing, raising livestock are no longer able to do so. So where do they go? They go to the cities, sometimes part-time, sometimes permanently. They migrate back and forth. What do they do when they take to the cities? They bring hunger and malnutrition with them. Oh, sorry. This migration is accelerating, particularly in Africa and Asia, where the world's most food insecure people are. Urbanization is influenced by many things, including climate change. But no matter the cause, new approaches are needed to tackle hunger in cities. Tackling hunger in cities requires different but complementary interventions to what we're doing in rural areas. Social safety nets, better markets, infrastructure that's designed to link rural producers in rural areas to consumers in cities, whether those consumers are impoverished or not. We need to be able to benefit both. My second challenge or charge to you is this: take a more expansive view of hunger and malnutrition, one that encompasses rural areas, cities, and the places in between. The global food security community, we focus on hunger in rural areas, almost as if hunger isn't a problem in cities. And ironically, the people who talk about smart cities and sustainable cities, they talk about everything but hunger. They don't think food and hunger are issues in cities. But they are. Hunger exists in cities. City residents need sustainable access to nutritious food. These two groups of people need to get together. We cannot solve a challenge like this apart. We need to do it in unison, working together, bringing all our expertise together. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying that hunger is no longer in rural areas. That's not true. I am saying that eliminating global hunger by 2030 will require us to recognize a more complex reality, that hunger and malnutrition exist in rural areas, cities, and in between, and that we have to attack food insecurity at all points along the rural to urban spectrum. The last thing I want to talk about is the fact that hunger, and we all know it, in cities can affect political stability. For example, just before the Civil War, Syria experienced the worst drought on record, and there's sound scientific evidence that this drought was caused by climate change. Because of the drought, up to 1.5 million people migrated from farms to cities, intensifying political unrest. Last month, the U.S. intelligence community released a new assessment on global food security, and it's a public document that you all can take a look at. It had some daunting conclusions. First, over the next 10 years, purchasing power in many countries will decline, and when this happens, urban residents will be the first affected. Second, the majority of countries already experience high to extreme food insecurity face risks that could worsen their food security through 2025. And third, the overall risk of food insecurity in many countries will actually increase during the next 10 years. And in some countries, declining food security will almost certainly contribute to social disruptions and political instability. So this is my last charge to you. Recognize that food security and nutrition are not the purview of development agencies alone, no matter how well and effectively those agencies work. This is a multidimensional issue with far-reaching political, economic, and social consequences. As Secretary Kerry said last month when speaking at the Milan Expo, this isn't only about food security, it's about global security, period. Lastly, and I know I'm going to be a few seconds over, but I'm going to keep going. The one last thing I'd like to say is to understand all these challenges and address them effectively as we go forward, we need better data. A lot of the data that we have is based on baselines that are 10 or 15 years old. It doesn't necessarily tell us the key things we need to know, like where is hunger and malnutrition, what's happening in cities, what's happening in rural areas, what are the migration statistics, why are people living. We need more up-to-date data. We need a definition of rural and urban that we can all agree about. If we are going to be effective and meet these emerging challenges as we move forward, we need to work on data and make it one of our first priorities. So thank you very much. Again, happy birthday to IFPRI.